All right, so today we're going to dive into a spiritual worldview that pretty much flips everything we think about success and failure completely on its head. It's based on the work of a woman named Claudia Reid, and it basically says that if you're suffering, like really suffering, it's not a sign you failed. Nope. It's actually a sign that you are incredibly important in the grand scheme of things.
So, the whole thing kicks off with this pretty jarring statement. It's aimed squarely at anyone who feels like they have absolutely hit rock bottom. But here's the twist. It tells them they're not a victim. They're a catalyst. They're the start of some huge cosmic event. So you gotta ask, right? What on earth does that even mean?
Okay, to really get a handle on this, we're going to walk through it in 5 steps. First up, the prophecy itself. Then we'll get into the 2 groups at the heart of all this. After that, we'll tackle this wild idea that suffering is actually a public warning. Then we'll unpack what's called refinement. And finally, we'll go over the very specific rules you're supposed to follow.
So, right at the very heart of this whole belief system is a prophecy. The idea is that a massive collapse is already happening right now. It's being framed as this huge rebalancing of the cosmic scales, a kind of day of reckoning for all those who got ahead while others were left behind.
Now, for this prophecy to even make sense, you have to understand that it splits the entire world into just 2 groups. That's it. You've got the chosen, and you've got the others. And according to this, well, you're on one of those paths. The big question is, which one? Because figuring that out is the key to absolutely everything that follows.
All right, so let's get into what these 2 groups actually are. When you hear a term like the chosen, what do you think of? Probably privilege, right? Well, in this prophecy, you've got to throw that idea right out the window. It's the complete opposite.
And here's the divide, laid out plain and simple. On one side, you have the chosen. Their lives are defined by immense hardship. We're talking loss, being pushed to the fringes, social exile. Then you have the others, who are sometimes called the laughers, and they're the ones who seem to have it all. Prosperity, a stable life, what looks like social success. And it's this massive gap between the 2 that the prophecy is all about.
And when we talk about the hallmarks of the chosen, we're not talking about just having a bad day. The specifics here are intense. We're talking about eviction, even homelessness, sleeping in your car or in shelters, chronic unemployment, sometimes for 5 or even 10 years, being betrayed by your closest friends and family. It's a level of hardship that makes you feel like a total loser, and then even God has completely abandoned you.
So imagine you're in that spot. What are you supposed to do? Well, this is where the teaching gets incredibly blunt, maybe even stunning. The instruction is this. You have to accept that nobody will ever love you. It says it's time to realize that your purpose isn't to find connection. You've been chosen to suffer. But all that suffering, it's not for nothing. It actually has a purpose. And this is probably the most radical claim in this entire worldview. All that pain you went through, it wasn't meaningless. It was a message, a warning to the entire world.
Yeah, the term they use for this is a billboard. The idea is that your very public collapse, the humiliation, the visible struggle, it served as a living, breathing warning sign to the others. You became a walking, talking billboard for what was coming for them.
And this is the central claim, the absolute core of it all. The suffering of the chosen wasn't just a warning sign. It's believed that it actually, spiritually and materially, fueled the prosperity of the others. It's this idea that your loss was a necessary sacrifice for their gain.
Okay, so this all leads up to the main event, the collapse of the others. But the theology behind why this happens is really specific, and you might be surprised to hear it's not about revenge. You know, you might think, oh, it's justice finally coming around. But the teaching is crystal clear. It ain't justice. It says you, the chosen, will never see justice for what happened to you. Ever. So you have to just let it go. So if it's not justice, then what in the world is it?
The term they use is refinement. Think of it like a divine cleaning up process. It's the idea that the others are now being put through the exact same brutal collapse that the chosen already endured. It's not payback. It's a kind of purification.
And people who follow this are told to watch for a very specific pattern of collapse, clear signs that this refinement is happening. First, housing becomes unstable. Maybe they can't afford a major repair or they miss mortgage payments. Next, their car fails or gets repossessed. And finally, their finances completely disintegrate to the point where they're maxing out credit cards just to buy food.
Okay, so let's say you're one of the chosen, and you're watching all this go down. How are you supposed to act? Well, there's a very clear, very strict mandate for what you should and should not do. It all starts with this really powerful farming metaphor. You can't plant anything until you break the ground. The idea is that the collapse you already went through, that was the breaking of the ground. Now, it's time to get that soil ready for something new.
And what does that mean in practice? Well, you have to dig up the old dirt. That means getting rid of bad habits like lying or gossiping. Then you add fresh soil by fundamentally changing your character. Only after you've done that can you plant new seeds and position yourself to actually receive new blessings.
But even as new provisions start to come in, the teaching is clear. This is about humility, not luxury. So you might be craving a steak and mashed potatoes, but what you get is plain spaghetti. You want a really good cup of coffee, but what God provides is hot water with lemon and sugar. The point is survival and refinement, not comfort.
Which brings us to the final instructions on how to behave. While you're watching this all happen to the others, you are not to gloat, laugh, or even smile. You're not supposed to call it justice. The main mandate is to mind your holy business. You're told to talk to God about everything and to document your feelings privately in a journal.
So, this entire worldview takes something we see as ultimate failure, suffering, and turns it into a sign of destiny. And it leaves us with a really provocative question to wrestle with. What is the ethical difference between watching others suffer and calling it justice versus watching them suffer and calling it refinement?